Welcome to The Executive Edge, Psychology of Success. In this comprehensive guide to mastering corporate confidence, we strip away the myth of perfection to reveal the true psychology behind high performance.
Welcome to The Executive Edge, Mastering Corporate Confidence. We are embarking on a journey not to change who you are, but to strip away the interference that prevents your true capability from being seen. You have reached a level in your career where technical expertise is no longer the primary differentiator. At the executive level, the differentiator is presence. It is the ability to command a room without shouting, to inspire trust without demanding it, and to navigate high-pressure environments with a calm, deliberate focus. Over the course of this series, we will dissect the behavioral psychology behind high performance. We will look at how you speak, how you stand, how you listen, and how you think. But before we can build up your external executive presence, we must first address the internal architecture. We must begin with the psychology of professional presence and the most dangerous myth in the corporate world, the myth of perfection. There is a fundamental misunderstanding about what confidence actually looks like. Early in our careers, we often confuse confidence with arrogance, or at least we confuse confidence with being the loudest voice in the room. We see the executive who interrupts, who dominates the conversation, who never admits a mistake, and we mistake that behavior for strength. But as a behavioral psychologist, I can tell you that this is rarely strength. It is a defense mechanism. Arrogance is a shield. It is a brittle exterior constructed to protect a fragile ego. The arrogant leader needs external validation to feel secure. They need to be right. They need to be the smartest person in the room. True confidence, however, is quiet. It is the absence of the need to prove yourself. A truly confident executive is comfortable with silence. They are comfortable saying, "I don't know the answer to that, but I will find out." They invite challenge because their self-worth is not tied to being infallible. When you operate from a place of true confidence, you become a magnet. People are drawn to you not because you demand their attention, but because you are stable. You become the eye of the storm. To reach this state, we have to confront a psychological barrier that holds back nearly every high-achieving professional I have ever coached. It is called the spotlight effect. The spotlight effect is a cognitive bias where we tend to overestimate how much other people notice about us. We walk into a boardroom and we are hyper-aware of everything we perceive as a flaw. We are thinking about the stain on our cuff, the slight tremor in our voice during the introduction, or the fact that we forgot one data point on slide 4. We feel as though there is a massive theatrical spotlight trained directly on us, illuminating every imperfection for the entire world to see. Research in social psychology, specifically studies led by Thomas Gilovich, has proven that this is an illusion. In reality, no one is watching you as closely as you are watching yourself. Your colleagues, your board members, your clients, they are all victims of their own spotlight effect. They are worrying about how they are being perceived. They are thinking about their own preparation, their own agendas, and their own insecurities. Understanding this is liberating. It means that the standard of perfection you are holding yourself to is not only unattainable, it is unnecessary. When you stumble over a word, the audience rarely registers it as a failure. They register it as a human moment, provided you do not panic. The error itself is rarely the problem. The problem is your reaction to the error. If you tense up, apologize profusely, and lose your train of thought, you signal to the room that something is wrong. If you simply correct yourself and move on, you signal resilience. You signal that you are in control. Perfection is static. It is rigid. Presence is fluid. Presence allows for the organic, messy reality of human interaction. When you stop trying to be perfect, you free up a tremendous amount of cognitive energy. Instead of monitoring yourself for mistakes, you can focus entirely on the message you are delivering and the people you are connecting with. You shift your internal monologue from "how do I look" to "how can I help them understand?" This shift in focus is the cornerstone of the executive edge. It moves you from a defensive posture to an offensive one. However, this internal shift is only the first step. While your audience may not notice the minor details you obsess over, they are exceptionally good at picking up on something else entirely: your energy. Humans are social animals, evolved to detect threats and intentions instantly. Before you even speak a word, your body is broadcasting a continuous stream of data about your emotional state. Our thoughts, whether they are anxious or confident, do not stay trapped in our minds, they manifest physically. This physical manifestation of thought is often where the battle for influence is won or lost. We spend hours refining our slide decks, memorizing our scripts, and polishing our data, yet we spend almost no time preparing the vessel that delivers that information, our bodies. This is a critical oversight because of how the human brain processes communication. You may have heard of the 7-38-55 rule, derived from the research of Professor Albert Narabian. While it is often oversimplified, the core principle remains vital for leadership communication, particularly when emotions or attitudes are involved. The rule suggests that only 7% of communication is verbal, the actual words you say. 38% is vocal, your tone, pacing, and volume, and a staggering 55% is visual, your body language. Think about the implications of this. If your words are saying, "I am confident in this strategy," but your shoulders are hunched, your voice is tight, and your gaze is darting around the table, your audience will not believe your words. They will believe your body. Evolution has wired us to trust nonverbal cues over linguistic ones because language can be easily fabricated, but the autonomic nervous system is much harder to fake. Therefore, to master corporate confidence, we must hack the feedback loop between the body and the brain. Most people wait to feel confident before they adopt a confident posture, but the research suggests we can reverse this process. We can use our bodies to change our minds. This brings us to the concept of power posing, popularized by social psychologist Amy Cuddy. The premise is that holding an expansive posture, standing tall, chest open, taking up space for as little as 2 minutes can alter your hormonal levels, increasing testosterone, which is linked to dominance and assertiveness, and decreasing cortisol, the stress hormone. Now, I'm not suggesting you stand like a superhero in the middle of a board meeting. That would be performative and likely perceived as aggressive or odd. The application of this science happens before you enter the room. Before a high-stakes negotiation or a keynote presentation, find a private space. Stand with your feet shoulder-width apart, stretch your arms out, or place your hands on your hips. Breathe deeply. You are physically signaling to your brain that you are safe, that you are large, and that you are in charge of your territory. When you eventually walk into the conference room, you simply maintain a more subtle version of this expansiveness. You sit comfortably, you do not cross your arms or legs in a defensive knot, and you occupy your chair fully. Beyond posture, we must consider the subtlety of the face. The human face is a billboard of micro-expressions, fleeting, involuntary facial movements that reveal true emotions. An executive who is trying to suppress anger or anxiety might succeed in keeping a neutral mouth, but their eyes will often betray them. Tension around the eyes, or the orbicularis oculi muscle, is a primary indicator of stress. To counter this, we focus on soft focus eye contact. Aggressive eye contact, staring someone down without blinking, triggers a threat response in others. Avoidant eye contact, looking down or away, triggers a suspicion of deception or insecurity. The executive balance is a steady, relaxed gaze. When you are listening, you look at the speaker to validate them. When you are speaking, you distribute your gaze to different key decision makers in the room, holding contact for a complete thought or sentence before moving to the next person. This prevents you from scanning the room like a lighthouse, which looks nervous, and instead creates a series of personal connections. Your tone of voice acts as the emotional carrier wave for your words. Under stress, our vocal cords tighten, causing our pitch to rise and our pace to accelerate. This is the sound of uncertainty. To sound authoritative, you must consciously lower your pitch and, more importantly, slow down. Speaking slowly implies that you are not afraid to be interrupted. It implies that your time is valuable and that what you have to say is worth waiting for. It allows you to use silence as punctuation. This is why we must radically reframe our understanding of small talk. In the high-velocity world of corporate leadership, many high performers view small talk as inefficiencies, verbal filler that stands between them and the real work. They check their phones in the elevator to avoid eye contact, they rush into meetings and immediately launch into agenda item number 1 without a pause for breath. This reaction, this sudden flush of heat, the racing heart, the narrowing of vision, is what psychologists call an amygdala hijack. It is a term coined by Daniel Goleman, and it describes a moment where your emotional brain overrides your rational brain. When someone critiques your work, questions your competence, or attacks your strategy in a meeting, your amygdala, the ancient alarm system in your brain, perceives this social threat exactly the same way it would perceive a physical threat, like a predator in the bushes. It does not distinguish between a PowerPoint correction and a saber-toothed tiger. It dumps cortisol and adrenaline into your bloodstream. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for logic, reasoning, and language, effectively shuts down. This is why, in the heat of the moment, you might struggle to find words, or you might say something defensive that you immediately regret. You are literally not thinking clearly because your biology has hijacked your psychology. To maintain executive presence, you must learn to override this override. You cannot stop the initial chemical surge, that is automatic, but you can control the duration of the hijack. The first step is the 6-second pause. It takes approximately 6 seconds for the initial burst of chemicals to dissipate enough for your rational brain to come back online. When you receive stinging feedback, do not speak. Take a sip of water. Take a slow breath. Adjust your notes. Buy yourself those 6 seconds. Once your prefrontal cortex is back in command, you need a framework to process the information. The most effective method is to separate the data from the story. The data is what was actually said. For example, a boss says, "This report is missing the Q3 projections and the formatting is inconsistent." That is the data. It is neutral. It is fixable. The story is what your insecurity tells you about that data. The story says, "My boss thinks I'm incompetent. I'm going to lose my job. Everyone in this room is laughing at me." The amygdala hijack feeds on the story, not the data. Your job is to aggressively filter out the narrative and cling to the facts. When you focus on the facts, you move from a victim mindset to a problem-solving mindset. You can say to yourself, "The missing projections are an error. I can fix the error." This de-escalates the threat. Furthermore, we must distinguish between constructive feedback and a personal attack. Constructive feedback, even when delivered poorly, is about the work. A personal attack is about you. If the criticism is, "This strategy is risky," that is about the work. If the criticism is, "You are being careless," that is a label on your character. When you hear a label, do not accept it. Mentally deflect it. Imagine the words hitting a glass shield in front of you and sliding off. You do not need to internalize their frustration. If someone is yelling or being aggressive, realize that their behavior is data about their emotional state, not a verdict on your worth. They are the ones in an amygdala hijack. If you stay calm while they lose control, you automatically win the status contest in the room. So, how do you respond verbally? Do not start with but. But is a defensive trigger. It invalidates everything the other person just said. Instead, use the curiosity pivot. Respond with, "Tell me more about that," or "Help me understand where you see the gap." This is a power move. It forces the critic to shift from attack mode to explanation mode. It buys you more time to think, and often, when asked to explain, the critic will soften their tone because they feel heard. You are not fighting them, you are engaging them. You are turning a confrontation into a consultation. Mastering this emotional regulation is the hallmark of high EQ. It signals that you are steady, unshakable, and mature. However, while emotional regulation is a universal skill, the way we process stimulation and energy varies drastically depending on our fundamental personality structure. For a significant portion of the workforce, the challenge is not just handling conflict, but surviving the sheer noise of the corporate world. This brings us to a critical misunderstanding in modern business, the extrovert ideal. For decades, corporate culture has been designed by and for extroverts. We embrace the open plan offices, the constant brainstorming sessions, the back-to-back meetings, and the loud networking happy hours. We have conditioned ourselves to believe that leadership looks like extroversion, that to be a leader, you must be gregarious, dominant, and constantly vocal. If you identify as an introvert, you have likely felt the pressure to fake it. You exhaust yourself trying to act like an extrovert, believing that your natural temperament is a liability. I am here to tell you that this is false. Introversion is not a flaw to be fixed. It is a different operating system with distinct competitive advantages. Introversion is not about shyness. Shyness is the fear of social judgment. Introversion is about how you respond to stimulation. Extroverts gain energy from social interaction. Introverts expend energy during social interaction and recharge through solitude. In a world that won't stop talking, the introvert's superpower is deep listening. While the extroverts in the room are busy thinking about what they want to say next, the introvert is often observing the room, synthesizing the information, and connecting dots that others miss. You are not just hearing the words, you are hearing the subtext. You are noticing who is uncomfortable, who is skeptical, and where the logic gaps are. This allows for the sniper approach to communication. In a meeting, an extrovert might fire a machine gun of ideas, some good, some bad, mostly filler. The introvert waits, they process, and then they take one shot. They speak one or two sentences that summarize the chaos and offer a clear path forward. Because they speak less, their words carry more weight. People learn that when you speak, it matters. To leverage this, you must stop trying to compete on volume and start competing on depth. Do not try to be the loudest voice, be the most thoughtful one. However, to sustain this, you must manage your social battery. Corporate environments are draining for introverts. If you are in meetings from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. without a break, by 3 p.m. your cognitive function will decline. You will become irritable and withdrawn. You need to engineer micro-restorative moments into your day. Block out time on your calendar that is sacred. Close your door. Put on noise-canceling headphones. Even 15 minutes of solitude can reset your nervous system. Do not apologize for this. It is performance maintenance. When it comes to networking, the introvert's advantage lies in the one-on-one. Large networking mixers are often nightmares for introverts. Stop forcing yourself to work the room. Instead, find one person, have a deep, meaningful conversation with that one person, exchange contact info, and follow up. A network built on 5 deep relationships is often more powerful than a network of 50 shallow acquaintances. You are built for depth, not breadth. Play to that strength. Furthermore, use the written word as your weapon. Introverts often express themselves better in writing because it allows for the processing time they crave. After a chaotic meeting where you felt you couldn't get a word in, send a follow-up email. Subject line, thoughts on today's discussion. In the body of the email, say, I've been reflecting on the points raised about the marketing strategy, and I wanted to add a perspective. This allows you to contribute your brilliance on your own terms without the pressure of the spotlight. It shows you are engaged and adds value, but it does so in a way that aligns with your neurology. By embracing your introversion, you stop fighting against yourself. You cultivate a quiet authority that is rare and magnetic. You prove that you do not need to shout to lead. But whether you are an introvert or an extrovert, there comes a time when you must move beyond simply managing your own energy and start actively influencing the decisions of others. You must transition from presence to persuasion.
This is why we must radically reframe our understanding of small talk. In the high-velocity world of corporate leadership, many high performers view small talk as inefficiencies, verbal filler that stands between them and the real work. They check their phones in the elevator to avoid eye contact. They rush into meetings and immediately launch into agenda item number 1 without a pause for breath. If this is your approach, you are not being efficient. You are operating a machine without oil. Small talk is not filler, it is social lubrication. It is the mechanism by which we establish safety and approachability before we attempt to transact business. When you bypass this step, you are asking for a transaction without a relationship. You are asking for compliance without connection. And in the long run, that friction wears down the gears of your team. Consider the psychology of trust. We trust people we know, and we know people by sharing low-stakes information. If I do not know who you are as a human being, my brain remains in a state of subtle alert. I am guarded. Small talk lowers that guard. It signals, I am part of your tribe. I am safe. Let's look at a concrete example to illustrate the mechanics of this. Imagine you walk into the office break room and run into a colleague from a different department, someone you need to collaborate with next month. You ask the standard question, how was your weekend? Here is the closed response, which is all too common. They say, it was fine, thanks. Yours? This is a verbal dead end. It is polite, but it is a wall. It offers 0 hooks for the other person to grab onto. The conversation dies, you make your coffee in awkward silence, and you walk away. Now, compare that to an open invitation response. You ask, how was your weekend? And they reply, it was actually great. I finally managed to take my kids to that new science museum downtown, though I think I was more excited about the dinosaur exhibit than they were. Analyze that answer. In 2 sentences, they have offered you 3 distinct hooks: family, the museum, or local culture, and a personal interest in dinosaurs or history. You now have a choice. You can ask about their kids, you can talk about the museum, or you can joke about the dinosaurs. The conversation flows naturally. Suddenly, you are not just 2 suits in a break room, you are 2 parents, or 2 history buffs, or just 2 people sharing a laugh. This is the art of the bid. In relationship psychology, a bid is an attempt to connect. A confident executive recognizes these bids and responds to them with enthusiasm. They also habitually offer bids to others. When you master this, you transform the 5 minutes before a board meeting into a strategic asset. You use that time to check the temperature of the room. You ask about a colleague's recent trip or comment on a shared experience. By the time the meeting officially starts, you have already established a baseline of rapport. You have turned the strangers around the table into allies. You have warmed up the room. And this warmth is crucial because once the meeting begins, the dynamic shifts, the stakes get higher, and the need for social lubrication is replaced by the need for assertive contribution. You move from the hallway, where the goal is connection, to the boardroom table, where the goal is influence. Once you are seated at that table, a different psychological challenge emerges. For many capable professionals, the boardroom is where their confidence evaporates. I call this the spectator trap. You sit in the meeting, you have brilliant ideas, you see the solution clearly, but you wait. You wait for the perfect opening. You wait for a lull in the conversation that never comes. You wait for an invitation to speak, and while you wait, the moment passes. The topic changes, the meeting ends, and you leave frustrated, having contributed nothing but your physical presence. The spectator trap is driven by the fear of judgment and the fear of interruption. We tell ourselves, I need to make sure my point is fully formed and perfect before I say it. But as we established earlier, perfection is the enemy of presence. To break this cycle, you need to change your entry strategy. The first rule of mastering meetings is the 5-minute rule. Force yourself to speak within the first 5 minutes of the meeting. It doesn't have to be a profound strategic insight. It can be a clarifying question, a validation of someone else's point, or a simple agreement with the opening remarks. The goal is to break the seal on your voice. Once you have spoken once, the psychological barrier to speaking a second time is significantly lower. You have established yourself as a participant, not an observer. But what if the room is hostile? What if the culture is one where people talk over one another and the loudest voice wins? In these environments, rely on the pre-meeting alliance. Never go into a high-stakes meeting alone if you can avoid it. Before the meeting, find a colleague who will be there too, someone you trust. Briefly discuss your agenda. Tell them, I'm planning to bring up the data on the supply chain project today. I'd appreciate your support on that. This does 2 things. First, it holds you accountable to speak up because you've told someone you will. Second, it gives you a wingman. When you start to speak, if someone tries to interrupt or dismiss you, your ally can step in and say, "Hold on, I want to hear what they have to say about the supply chain." This social proof is incredibly powerful. Even with an ally, interruptions happen. How you handle an interruption defines your authority in the room. Most people, when interrupted, simply stop talking. They cede the floor immediately, signaling that the interrupter's voice is more important than their own. You must learn to reclaim the floor with grace and firmness. You do not need to be aggressive, you just need to be persistent. If someone jumps in while you're speaking, try the vocal bridge. Don't stop your sentence. Instead, slightly increase your volume and maintain a steady rhythm. Often, the interrupter will back down if you simply keep going. If they persist, use a targeted phrase. Stop, make direct eye contact, and say calmly, "I'd like to finish that thought, and then I'm happy to hear your perspective," or "Please let me complete this point." The key is to keep the emotion out of it. Do not sound petulant or angry. Sound like a traffic controller, neutral, authoritative, and in charge of the flow. Another effective technique is the reflective pivot. If someone interrupts to disagree, let them finish and then say, "That is a valid concern, and it actually leads directly to the point I was about to make." This allows you to validate them, lowering their defenses while seizing control of the conversation back to your agenda. The ability to hold your ground in a meeting is not about being the loudest. It's about having the discipline to value your own contribution. It's about understanding that your voice belongs at that table. However, there is a force that can dismantle even the most practiced meeting techniques: the raw, visceral reaction to criticism. When the conversation turns from strategy to feedback, and that feedback is negative, the challenge shifts from speaking up to keeping your cool. This transition to external influence forces us to confront the mechanics of persuasion. Whether you are an introvert engaging in deep listening or an extrovert rallying the room, the ultimate objective of executive communication is rarely just to inform, it is to persuade. We are constantly negotiating for budgets, for resources, for timelines, and for buy-in on our strategic vision. However, many professionals approach negotiation as a battle, a zero-sum game, where for me to win, you must lose. This is an antiquated model. In the corporate ecosystem, you cannot afford to scorch the earth. You have to work with these people again tomorrow. Therefore, true executive persuasion is not about conquering the opposition, it is about alignment. It is the art of helping others see that your solution solves their problem. One of the most potent psychological principles you can leverage here is the rule of reciprocity, popularized by Dr. Robert Cialdini. The rule is simple. Humans have a hardwired compulsion to repay debts. If you do something for me, I feel a psychological burden to do something for you. In a negotiation context, this means you should rarely start by asking. Start by giving. This give does not have to be material. You can give information. You can give a concession on a minor point. You can give public recognition. When you enter a negotiation for a budget increase, do not start with your demands. Start by acknowledging the constraints the finance director is under. Say, I know you are under pressure to cut overheads this quarter, and I want to help us meet that target. By offering empathy and alignment first, you trigger a reciprocal desire in them to help you with your request. But what happens when the answer is no? For many, no sounds like a rejection. It sounds like the end of the conversation. But to a skilled negotiator, no is simply the starting gun. Psychologically, saying no makes people feel safe. When someone says yes, they get nervous about commitment. When they say no, they feel they have protected their territory. Therefore, do not fear the no. Invite it. Instead of asking, is this a good time to talk, which pressures them to say yes, ask, is now a bad time to talk? It is easier for them to say no, which actually means go ahead. Let's apply this to a high-stakes scenario, asking for a raise or a significant promotion. The amateur walks in and lists their achievements. I did X, I did Y, so I deserve Z. This is self-centered. The executive approach frames the request around future value. You sit down and say, I want to ensure I'm delivering maximum value to the company over the next 2 years. Based on the market and my expanded scope, I'd like to adjust my compensation to X. If they say no, the budget isn't there, do not retreat. Pivot. Ask how questions. I understand the budget constraints. How can we structure a plan where if I hit these specific targets by Q3, the adjustment is triggered? Or what does it look like for me to be at that level in 6 months? This changes the dynamic from a confrontation to a collaboration. You are now solving a problem together. You are shifting from me versus you to us versus the problem. Yet, even when you succeed, when you get the raise, the promotion, or the corner office, you may find that instead of feeling triumphant, you begin to feel a creeping sense of dread. You begin to suspect that it was all a mistake.
This dread is the hallmark of the imposter phenomenon, commonly known as imposter syndrome. It is the persistent inability to internalize your success, accompanied by the fear that you will be exposed as a fraud. You think, they are going to realize I don't know what I'm doing. I just got lucky. I'm out of my depth. It is crucial to understand that imposter syndrome is not a sign of incompetence. In fact, it is often a sign of competence. The Dunning-Kruger effect shows us that incompetent people often overestimate their abilities because they lack the knowledge to know what they don't know. High achievers, on the other hand, are acutely aware of how much they don't know. Your awareness of your gaps is actually proof of your expertise. The imposter cycle is a behavioral loop. A new challenge arises, you feel anxiety, you over-prepare to quell that anxiety, working late, obsessing over details, or you procrastinate out of fear. When you succeed, your brain discounts the victory. It says you only succeeded because you stayed up all night, or you only succeeded because the project was easy. The anxiety is reinforced, and the cycle repeats with the next challenge. To break this, we must use cognitive reframing. We have to change the narrative. The first step is to recognize pluralistic ignorance. This is the psychological state where we believe we are the only ones struggling because we have access to our own internal doubts, but only access to everyone else's external confidence. You see their highlight reel, you live in your own blooper reel. I assure you, the CEO, the board members, and the mentors you admire, they all have moments where they feel like frauds. It's a universal tax on growth. Instead of fighting the feeling, reframe it. When the voice says, I don't belong here, answer with, I am learning here. Shift your identity from the expert to the learner. If you define yourself as an expert, every question you can't answer is a threat to your identity. If you define yourself as a learner, every question you can't answer is an opportunity to grow. Stop seeking external validation to cure an internal wound. No amount of praise will silence the imposter voice because you'll just dismiss the praise as being nice. You must validate yourself. Keep a success journal. Write down your wins, big and small, and specifically write down what you did to achieve them. This forces your brain to acknowledge the causal link between your skills and your outcomes. This internal rewiring is essential because the modern workplace strips away many of the external structures we used to rely on. We are no longer just walking into a physical room where we can read the energy. We are increasingly leading through a camera lens where the nuances of confidence are flattened into pixels.
The shift to digital communication, Zoom, Teams, Slack, email, has created a crisis of presence. We rely on the 55% of communication that is visual, but in a virtual environment, that visual data is compressed or eliminated. We are left with digital body language. In a remote context, confidence is conveyed through clarity and responsiveness. Let's start with the video call. The spotlight effect we discussed in part 1 is amplified here because you literally see a video feed of yourself. Hide self-view. Watching yourself speak creates a feedback loop of self-consciousness that drains your processing power. Then, address the eye contact illusion. To make eye contact in person, I look at your eyes. To make eye contact on Zoom, I must look at the camera lens, a cold black circle. If I look at your face on the screen, to you it looks like I am looking down. When you are delivering a key message or trying to persuade, you must train yourself to look directly into the lens. This feels unnatural, but on the receiver's end, it feels like deep, unwavering connection. Posture still matters. If you are slumped in your chair at home, your voice will sound slumped. Sit effectively. Frame yourself so your head and shoulders are visible. Do not be a floating head at the bottom of the screen.
Beyond video, we must master the tone of text. In the absence of facial expressions, written text often reads as colder than intended. A period can look like aggression. Fine with a period seems angry. Fine without punctuation seems neutral. We need to use digital emotional markers. This means using exclamation points strategically, not to be unprofessional, but to convey warmth. Thanks is significantly warmer than thanks. It means using clear active verbs. Also, be wary of the briefness trap. Leaders often send short, curt emails thinking they are being efficient. Fix this, see me. To the recipient, this reads as anger or panic. Taking 10 extra seconds to add context, this needs adjustment because of X context, let's discuss, preserves the psychological safety of your team. Response time is also a signal of respect. You do not need to be always on, that leads to burnout, but you need to be predictable. If you are reliable in your digital communication, you build virtual trust. People know that if they ping you, you will respond within a set time frame. Mastering these digital channels is not just about technical proficiency, it is about translation. You are translating your warmth, your authority, and your intent through a digital barrier. Once you can do this, once you can command a room you are not physically in, you are ready for the final evolution. You are ready to stop being just a high performer and start being a true leader. We have arrived at the summit of our journey. We have dismantled the myth of perfection, tuned the instrument of your body and voice, navigated the complexities of conflict, and mastered the digital realm. But all of these skills are merely tools. The final piece is the hand that wields them. The most difficult transition for any executive is the shift from doing to empowering. For your entire career, you have been rewarded for being the best doer. You were the best analyst, the best salesperson, the best engineer. Your confidence was built on your personal output. But as you ascend to the executive level, the script flips. Your job is no longer to be the smartest person in the room. Your job is to build a room full of smart people. This requires a type of confidence that is devoid of ego. It is the confidence to be unnecessary. A great leader builds a team that can function without them. If you are constantly hoarding information, making every micro decision, and solving every crisis, you are not leading, you are bottlenecking. You are driven by the fear that if you aren't doing, you aren't valuable. True executive presence is about stewardship. It is about creating an environment where others can have presence. It is about using your power to shield your team from chaos, using your voice to amplify their ideas, and using your negotiation skills to get them the resources they need. When you operate from this mindset, the imposter syndrome fades because it is no longer about you. The spotlight effect disappears because you are shining the spotlight on others. You are no longer performing, you are serving. Let's review the architecture of the executive edge we have built together. We started by realizing that confidence is not the absence of fear, but the management of it. We learned to stand tall and breathe deep, hacking our biology to project strength. We discovered that listening is more powerful than speaking, and that no is just a request for more information. We learned to tame the amygdala, to engage the introvert's depth, and to project warmth through a fiber optic cable. This is not a checklist, it is a transformation of character. It is the realization that you have control over the signal you broadcast to the world. So here's my final challenge to you. Do not try to implement all 10 parts of this series tomorrow. That is the trap of perfectionism. Pick one. Maybe tomorrow you will focus purely on your posture, walking into every room with your chest open. Maybe you will focus on the 6-second pause before responding to a difficult email. Maybe you will simply stop apologizing for taking up space. Choose one small behavior and master it, then choose another. Competence builds confidence. Momentum builds presence. You have the tools. You have the psychology. The edge is no longer something you are looking for. It is something you already have. Now go out there, take a deep breath, and use it. Thank you for listening to The Executive Edge. Lead well.